Happy Monday, people. I want to talk about the importance of asking questions because it's important. And I think most people know that it's important, but I think there's a lot of fake acceptance of asking questions. And there are other factors that go into that, but I don't think people are as open to questions as they say they are. And I think some of that's appropriate and some of it isn't. But asking questions is how we learn new things. It requires curiosity to learn something new and a willingness to understand something that you don't understand already. And being curious and then asking a question helps get us to answers and understanding. We can think of lots of times in history where that's been not allowed. So a lot of governments that don't allow questions to be asked is problematic. Religions that don't allow it is problematic. And communities that don't allow it is problematic. There's also an issue of where your heart's coming from with the question. So anyone who's watched, really any political discourse nowadays can see questions being asked in a insulting way. They're not really meant to be curious, they're meant to be gotcha moments. I don't necessarily think they shouldn't be allowed to ask those questions, but there's a difference between a genuine question and a question meant to just, rile someone. And it's okay to ask questions, I think, that are meant to make someone stuck. I don't like the statement of like a gotcha question, but it's okay to ask certain questions as metaphor or comparison. Well, if that's okay, does that mean this is okay? Or you said that about this, but you're over here doing this. And sometimes we need those questions asked for us to reflect. That's where a good question can be helpful. Is if you're being judgmental, for instance, and you say that you're not a judgmental person or that being judgmental is bad, and someone points out judgmental behavior by you by saying, hey, haven't you said that people aren't supposed to say that? It's phrased as a question, and that person has to reflect on their own actions and statements they've said in the past. So it's using their own beliefs to keep them accountable. It's not using someone's beliefs against them. It's helping people stay congruent with what they've said. And if there is an incongruence, and they have to reconcile that by either changing the belief or changing the incongruent thing and making it congruent. So I think questions are extremely important. And there's definitely an art to asking them. And I think as a therapist, that's something that I'm supposed to refine as time goes on. And I think every good therapist really is supposed to do that, get better at question asking. And I'm far from where I want to be with that, but I'm also content with where I'm at with question asking, just wanting to get better at it and be curious in the right directions. And I think it's also important in healthy relationships to pay attention to what questions can be asked and which ones can't. And again, there is a necessary prerequisite of being genuine with the question. So if you're going over to someone and you are asking a dramatic question and you're being very forceful and hyper direct and rude, and they get defensive, and then you get upset like, oh, I can't even ask questions, you're probably not in the right in that situation. You have to come with a genuine desire to understand, not to get the other person. A better way to look at this is to make sure that your point of the question is to make the world better, to make you better and the person you're asking it better. Because answering questions refines us too. So if I'm asked a question, I should be made better by answering it. that makes sense? So if I'm asked and I give an answer that is thoughtful and I think through it, that refines me in my ability to answer that type of question, helps me to better understand the topic I'm talking about, and it helps me to respect and build that person up in this new understanding. And that's really important. So asking the question is important, but a thoughtful and wise answer is, I don't know if I'd say equally important, but maybe more important. It's just they both matter a lot. So those things are, I think, paramount to any type of progress, any type of relationship building, any type of community building, is you have to be able to ask questions and not be put down. Now, there are some questions that people ask that can be scary. Think about like a really young child coming to a parent and asking a question that's really sexual, and the parent's first thought might be like, how do they even know to ask that? And some red flags might go up. That's okay. But the part of that that's good is that the child asks a question, and it's the parent's job to not respond aggressively or dismissively or overreactively, because you don't want to scare the child into not asking future questions, which a lot of leaderships and authorities do. This is why a lot of people won't ask questions or they won't be curious. Think about a topic, or I'm sure most people can think about something that they would be scared to ask other people because of the political environment that we're in. So think about that for a second. Is there any question that you'd be afraid to ask someone because of the political climate and potential social ramifications? I think most people would say yes. And these aren't questions that are bad. They're just questions that people have genuine curiosity around, but we get berated for the answers or for the question being asked at all. You should just know that, or why would you ask a question like that? That's super unhealthy, and it happens a lot with political issues right now. And it's happened in the past, but it's not good right now. And it's important to ask questions. And it's also important when you're receiving a question to hear it as a desire to understand. And if the person sounds like they're saying it from a rude place, you could maybe start by giving them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they're genuinely curious. And you can ask that. Are you genuinely curious, or are you trying to do something with this? Just de-escalate and be curious back. That's a question with a question. These things are important to be able to refine and be able to do. Humans and people are very thoughtful creatures when we ask questions, and I know sometimes people feel like we're bogged down in language and talking in circles, and that can happen. You can over-intellectualize things. But we also are just intellectual beings, and we need space to be curious, and growth happens through curiosity. And people have been harassed, outcasted, and killed throughout all of history for just asking questions and putting forth new ideas. And they're like, hey, I think this might be this case. I'm going to stay curious about this. And people have just been killed over that. Galileo, I believe, for the heliocentric theory, killed. So, just wild. I remember hearing a story, which to my knowledge is true, of the person who discovered pi was murdered for that too. The story that I'm recalling is one I heard in high school, and I think it's the guy who discovered it. This can be easily checked. But he proposed like a number that is unending, infinite, 3.14, and then it just goes for a long time, forever. And apparently it was on a ship, and it drove the people mad there, and they're like, that's not, it has to end, and they just like threw him overboard, supposedly. So it was either that guy or someone else who was just talking about it. And yeah, people were like, nope, that's not an idea we like. And you can think about that today. I know it's now kind of a funny, crazy story, but people are like that politically now. They hear ideas they don't like, and they're like, oh, get rid of that person. Super unhealthy and super immature behavior, but it's everywhere. The overall immaturity of our country is really sad, and a lot of it comes from people can't ask questions and be curious. And I I'm staying on this because I don't think people really understand how important that is to be able to ask questions and to be curious. And one of the reasons so many people put it down is because if you have a belief and someone questions it and you get reactive to it, that's not usually because you're being questioned. It's because you don't believe it as strongly as you think. Someone points something out and you have to reconcile now. If you believe something to be true and someone asks you a question that you hadn't thought about and it makes this thing a little unstable, that's really scary. And you have to figure out, okay, that's a scary question. How do I go about that? And people will choose oftentimes, instead of dealing with this pain of reconciling the question, they'll double down and say, no, I'm right. And how dare you ask that? And you're actually a bad person for asking that. And they freak out. Think about the news you watch and think about the people that you can't talk to. It's very unhealthy. And it doesn't matter if it's a topic that you agree with or disagree with. There are topics that I believe in that people get questioned about and they get that reactive response. And I would say you're right about the topic, but your reactivity shows that you actually haven't thought through the topic. So you think about, like, if a child just talks about, we'll go back to heliocentric theory, that the sun is the center of the universe or the center of the solar system. If a child just comes upon that and figures it out, as reading a book or watching TV or looking at the sky, and they make a really good guess, and they say that and they believe it, and then a kid a year or two older talks about the earth being at the center and gives reasons that the maybe 4-year-old understands those reasons, like, oh, that makes sense. Now they're questioning their belief. They're still right, even if they came about it through just basic learning or an accident. They haven't actually been able to test that fully, but they're right. Then someone comes in with a little bit more information, also not well tested, but that sounds more official, and then this person questions it. So just because we question belief doesn't mean we're wrong about the original belief. It just means another level or another tier of understanding has been put into the argument, and that has to be reconciled at that level of understanding. And so this is my encouragement, like, don't freak out when you have to question stuff. Yes, you might end up being wrong and have to change. But the age-old piece there is, wouldn't you rather be right and know the truth than live in a lie? And what sucks is that, no, most people would actually rather live in a lie because it's more comfortable. Most people typically sit there, and this is why my field exists in so many ways. People don't want to reconcile the truth of what's happening. And that's actually where their turmoil comes, is they are lying. Lying is so much at the center of mental health issues. And it's not the mental health issue, don't get me wrong there, but it's a big factor in why people can't heal, is there's a certain lie that they're telling themselves that is more comfortable than facing the truth. And that happens a lot. And that's a root cause of a lot of people's issue. And I won't go into it with them and say your root issue is lying, but trauma can be that as well. If we're having some sort of separation mentally, or we're pretending things didn't happen, or that they're actually okay, it wasn't that bad, or I'm actually the one that was responsible for it, because we can reconcile that narrative easier than the lie. And again, that's why asking those questions is important. Was it really your fault? Someone's like, yes, it was my fault. Why is it your fault? Well, because I did this. And if someone else in your position experienced that, would you be telling them that was their fault? Well, no. So you'll shame yourself, but you won't shame this other innocent person, because you know that it's not their fault and not your fault. Think about this a lot with child abuse and sexual assault. People will try to find ways to make it their responsibility. Yeah, I should have done this differently, or I should have been more respectful of my parents, or I shouldn't have been behaving like that out and about. It's like, yeah, maybe you could have behaved better in those moments, and at the same time, does that create an excuse for people to take advantage of you or be abusive? No. And then you ask that same person, well, what about another person in that situation? And pretty much all the time they'll say it's not that person's fault. Sometimes people will. They've shifted that narrative to not just be self-inflicting, but outward. And that becomes destructive in a greater way. And we start over-projecting. And people do this on the other end too. You think about a child that's abused, and you think about someone who's sexually assaulted. The abuser and the assaulter, they sometimes realize that what they did was wrong, and for them, they don't want to reconcile the truth of it. So they create an excuse of why that person deserved it, or why they're in the right. That's another form of that external destruction of like, well, I'm not going to face this horrible truth about myself. I'm actually going to take 5 steps deeper into being evil instead of reconciling the evil I did and choosing a good route. And the ironic part is you can heal faster than the timeline of damage, generally speaking. So if someone was abused for 10 years as a child, it won't usually take 10 years to pull them out of that. It goes a lot faster. So generally speaking, we will heal, and it does not help to keep stepping further into pain and evil behavior. So, and we get to these places by asking these questions and probing a little bit and being curious and in the right relationships, pushing with those questions. And the depth of the relationship and the intimacy there is what will often give permission for certain questions. That's why one question asked to this person versus this person might be very different. Not because they're different people, that's one of the reasons, but because my relationship with this person maybe is 10 years in, and we have a very close relationship, and this person I met a week ago, and I'm asking the same question, but this person, me and them, we understand each other's hearts for the question. This person doesn't fully know that with me, and they might take it as a defensive, like I can't get deep with that person, I gotta be defensive. Or that sounds offensive to me, the question, and I'm gonna shut that down and even project that back onto them of you're wrong for asking it, where this person might take it and be like, I love the question, let's talk about it. And so that's also a thing of don't be discouraged if you ask questions and people don't respond well. When they don't respond well though, we are in a good place to ask why. It's not good to just be like, well, screw that person, they shouldn't freak out about it. Don't do that. Ask yourself why they shut down about it. And that doesn't mean you can get to the point where every question is always going to land well, but something broke down. Was it an appropriate question? Did you actually ask it with curiosity, or were you upset and did you have an agenda behind the scenes that you were trying to get at? That's really important. And a lot of us do. Even people who are good at asking questions and who think about their questions like I do, there are moments where my emotions are coming up. It can be hard to sift through the ulterior motives at times, and it's important to do that. And then when you do that, because I don't know that we're all going to be fully immune to that forever, there's, even as you get better, there's hiccups that happen. Can you own that and be like, you know what, I was asking it from a place of hurt or a place of pain or just wanting to be rude, and I apologize. And we might not actually be curious anymore, or we can ask it with real curiosity. And people feel the difference there. Like if people are pushing you away because of the questions you're asking, there's a high chance that's your problem, not theirs. Very high chance. And I'm not going to say it's for sure, because it also depends on the circles that you're in. But that's worth reflecting on, like, why are people shutting down with my questions? And also reflecting on why you feel like you can't ask certain questions, or why it's hard when people ask you certain questions. If you get super reactive to a question, you've probably got some insecurities, and that's worth reflecting. Paying attention. Why did I get upset and offended that this person asked me a question? And questions are pretty much harmless. I know people say that words have impact, and I believe that very much. Questions are relatively harmless. Usually what creates the harm is unresolved pain. So it wasn't even the question, it was other pain that we have that's brought up with the question being asked. Or it's the way it's asked, or who asked it. So if someone close to you asked a question that is hurtful and you didn't expect that, it's harder. But again, remember that questions are curiosity. They're not statements. If the person says it in a rude or over-direct way, it might feel more like an attack, and they might be meaning it that way, and they're pretending it's not that by just asking. They're like, it's just a question, I'm just curious. So I'm trying to present some of the complexity with question asking, why it's extremely important. One of the most important conversational things that you can do is questions. And it's very ancient as a practice. Greeks and Hebrews, all of them were very question oriented, and it wasn't uncommon to answer questions with a question. And again, this can go to hyper redundancy and be a waste of people's time. But this is so integral to societal growth and relational growth, is the ability to ask and answer questions and to reflect and think about questions even when you don't have an answer, and to really sit with it for a long time. And you don't have to do that all the time. Someone comes up to you and they say, "How's your day going?" Most of us be like, "Good." I don't think that's not necessarily rude. It might not be super honest, but also might be a layer of honesty, surface honesty. Someone asks me right now how my day's going. If I say good, I'd be telling the truth. It just wouldn't be a full truth. If they said, "I'm going to set a 5-minute timer and you need to talk the whole time and tell me how your day's going," I might say, "It's going pretty well, and this is what's going on. This is what I'm feeling." It would get more elaborated because the space is there. Good is true, but it's not the full truth. Just like if someone said, how many people are on the earth, and you said like 8 billion or something, that would be true, but it wouldn't actually be as true as you could get, because there's not 8 billion. There's a lot of other numbers where those zeros would be that are accurate, and it changes every second. Same as someone asks you the time. If it's 8:13, I might say it's about 8:15. It is about 8:15, but it's not the exact truth of what the time is. It's actually 8:13, and even that's not the exact truth. It's 8:13 plus some seconds, and there's certain things that we accept with that. And so as you go deeper into questions, you draw more out. You ask someone in therapy how they're feeling, and they're saying, "I'm kind of upset today." Well, usually any type of upset, frustration, mad, anger, those are often secondary emotions hiding something else. Why are you upset? What's going on? My partner was just kind of dismissive of me this morning, and it was making me really upset. It's like, "Are you feeling anything underneath that upset?" I'm like, "I don't know, not really." "Oh, how are they dismissive to you?" I just said good morning, and they just kind of kept reading their book and didn't do anything. How did it feel in that moment? It felt kind of hurt. And then you, after that, felt angry. Yeah. Okay, so you're feeling hurt. Why are you feeling hurt? I just want my partner to respond to me in the morning. Why is that important to you? It just shows that they love me. Okay. So you didn't receive this love and affection in that moment, and you felt pained and hurt. And as it sat with you for a moment, it made you feel upset, and you went out the door and you came here. Yeah. So they were telling the truth that they're upset. But the problem for their morning was that they felt unloved, which created hurt, which was then covered by feeling upset, because that's easier to handle than feeling hurt. And the conversation with me is easier in therapy than going to their partner and saying, "There are moments where I feel unloved by you, and it's really hard, and I want to talk about that." It's a fuller answer, and all of them were true. But the extra questions there to dive deeper help us get a better understanding. And as that understanding goes up, the intimacy and vulnerability goes deeper, and we have to face something in a more difficult way. And if trust is built in therapy, they'll trust me to hold that, which, interestingly, they might not trust the partner, because they're like, they're just going to be mean and unloving again if I open up about that. They're going to tell me I'm too sensitive. And it's like, okay. And that's very true for people. Other times, we experience that in our childhood. Well, my dad would do that, or my mom would do that, and so I get really scared. And in reality, that partner wishes they would know and wishes that they could be told. So some relationships, that's there, but past hurt keeps this person closed and unwilling to open up. And other times it's because that partner has shown that they'll put their spouse down. So there are reasons for all this stuff. So ask questions. I'm going to encourage that. I'll kind of leave it there. Questions are important. I encourage you all to be very mindful with your questions, be very mindful with your answers, and aim for being very loving and respecting in these questions that you ask. And know that the idea is to always benefit the relationship, benefit the world, benefit each other. It's not to put people down. If your question is to bring people down, probably just don't open your mouth. Go do something else. And instead, find better ways to ask questions and be genuinely curious and be genuinely loving and seeking of truth in a way that benefits as many people as possible in the process. So, yeah, as always, if you're interested in therapy services, reach out in the description and feel free to contact me, connect with me. I'd be happy to get you connected either with me or with someone else. And we'll do that through a series of questions that I hope I've curated well. So happy Monday to everyone, and we'll see you next week.